So welcome to Monday evening. Are we Instagram or YouTube or both? Just YouTube tonight, so we don't have to do a wait for everyone to join. Thanks for joining us. Been a great week of golf this week. Obviously the ladies major at the Evian last week. Another one coming up soon, so hence our guest who's going to be joining us this evening is a legend of the ladies tour, Trish Johnson. 8 Solheim Cups, 28 pro wins. She's doing some commentating now as well, so going to have great insights on some of the tournaments just happened and coming up, and just a general bit of insight on ladies game as well and relevance. So I think quite an interesting one to bring in, especially with what's going on at the moment for the majors for them, for the girls. And obviously just unknown tonight, it's somebody's birthday today, so he's having today off. So we thought give him some time with the dog. Dog love this evening. He's just at home with Barney and hopefully watching. I'm sure he's watching on his special day. So as with every week, just keep the questions coming in. Anything that comes up, I'll try and keep a beady eye on the chat as things come in. But I think I've seen potentially Trish's lined up. I think I saw Trish. So we'll bring her in very soon. As soon as I see that flash back up on screen again, we'll make sure we bring her in shortly. But there are going to be some product launches coming up this week. There are some international embargoes lifting on Titleist product on Thursday, so that's coming up. And then there are going to be other products from a couple of brands over the next few weeks too as well. So we'll have plenty to bring you on the equipment front coming up. Let's see where we are at the moment. Any sign of Trish yet? No. Oh, she's in? Okay, yeah. So as soon as Trish is ready to come in, we'll bring her in. I think better at the beginning, get the star guest in up front. People don't want to listen to me all hour anyway. So as soon as I'll put my headphone in. All right. Trish, can you hear me?
I can, Si. Yeah, I can. How are you?
Perfect. It's like the start of every conversation. So back in sunny Wales, I believe.
Well, yes. I drove home last night, and I have to say, I had the golf kind of on, just peeking out the corner of my eye. And as the weather got worse and worse and worse, I saw sort of the playoff going on. And by the time I got to Junction 36, which is about 5 minutes away from the golf club, dear God. I mean, it was absolutely catastrophic weather. So, I know what it's like to play in that, but I'm not sure. I think I've played an Open in that sort of weather once, but that it was brutal because we were watching it in the studio as well. And what was quite funny was that Evian, the commentators were saying how windy it was, and myself and Sarah were just sort of, really? Are you serious? Because do you want to have a look at what's going on in Porthcawl? So, pretty entertaining week all round. So.
And because you're local there now, as you've been playing out of Porthcawl?
Yeah, so I literally live around the corner. So Jamie Spence, who was commentating, was staying at my house, which is literally 5 minutes away from the golf course. Both 5 minutes from Royal Porthcawl and 5 minutes the other way from Pyle and Kenfig, which is where the pre-qualifying was. I practice at Porthcawl a lot, well, every day really. The practice facilities are pretty magnificent. I was going to go down there today, but I thought better of it. I've had 6 weeks doing either playing or commentating or in the studio, so I just had a day off. I'm watching the cricket.
Yeah, well, it seems to be quite exciting at the moment from what I can gather.
Yeah, 2 more wickets needed, so very entertaining.
And obviously been in the studio commentating with Evian, and what we saw from Celine Boucher was felt like the same as watching Brian Harman at the Open, where he just got one player who just schooled everyone.
Yeah, she was by far and away the best player pretty much all week. She looked very calm, totally in control of her emotions and golf game. The golf course is sort of perfect for her, really. It's not I don't think it really helps. It was running quite, it wasn't really soft, even though it was fairly lush actually, looks wise. But it was running off the tee. She's not the longest hitter, but she's very a straight hitter. Really good iron player and unbelievable short game, as good as anyone's in the game. And like I say, she didn't put a foot wrong. She started out on Sunday 3 birdies in the first 5 holes, and honestly, it was game, set, match. It was done, because there was no one else that was playing even close to playing the same level of golf that she was. And she looked really comfortable all the way around. A couple of times, maybe she was out of position early on, actually, but she made birdies off them, because she just made sure that if she missed the green, she missed it on the side where it would roll down to the flag. There was a couple of quite generous flags on the front nine. And she wasn't on the fairway, but she would, roll it off and quite, on purpose, not through luck, I don't think. Yeah, and she thoroughly deserved to win, and it was never in any doubt.
And I mean, the one thing with Evian, I think looking at the list of winners over the last 10 years, it's an incredibly international mix of players and totally different player styles that seem to have won as well, with Brooke Henderson and Natalie Corder and Celine. I mean, think of the amount of different. I remember what stood out to me was the amount of different nationalities that have won there as well.
Yeah, she's the first French woman ever to win Evian, so it was an extraordinary watch on Sunday. I mean, I've played Evian probably, I don't know, in my career 15 times minimum, I suppose, since it was the Evian Masters. And it's not known for its crowds. Well, there must have been 10,000 people out there watching that one group on Sunday, which was incredible. It really was a great atmosphere, a great advert for French golf, French sport, I think, in all honesty, because they, as was pointed out on the telecast, they've not had many French winners of any, whether it be Roland Garros. I think Yannick Noah's won that once, and I think there was one other winner. I can't remember who it was. Apologies for that. But, any French national tournament for a French person to have won it, this was sort of the third time in history. So it was a huge occasion. But yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, the women's game is in, I suppose you'd have to say it's an incredibly strong place at the moment, in that of the last 21 major winners, Minjee Lee aside, because she's won 2 of the last 21, there's been a different winner. So there's 20 different winners in the last 21 majors. That's extraordinary. And it just shows you the strength in depth of the women's game at the moment. There's so many players capable, and there's going to be another one soon, because you've got Rose Yang, you've got Lynn Grant, you've got, so many other players I can think of. So it's a pretty extraordinary stat, actually.
I mean, that is an incredible stat, actually. I mean, the one thing that's always struck me is, I think certainly for the ladies' game more than the men's game, is how strong the Asian players have been. Certainly if you take from Suri Pak in the 90s, I hope I'm not getting that wrong, seemed to be the trailblazer, and then just been such a strong global force. And that, I think, was more so than the men's game by far. Bigger influence on tournaments and just generally the volume of players who are up there each week.
Yeah, obviously you're correct in thinking that Suri Pak was the trailblazer, no question. Then you had Inbee Park really come after that, and she would freely admit that Suri was her sort of hero, or the one that she looked to. And since then, I think what people need to realise as well, though, that the Japanese tour has always been immensely strong. Over the years, way back when Ayako Okamoto was, back in the 80s when Okamoto was winning majors on the LPGA, Japanese tour has always been a massively strong tour in its own right. But since then, the sort of Korean tour started up, and they have so many good players just playing on the Korean tour. Forget about the ones that play on the LPGA, which is probably about, 50 odd players. I think, I'm not quite sure. But yes, they have a work ethic that is second to none. And yeah, just having that, I think Seri was one of those things they saw as, it wasn't possible before. And then they, out of nowhere, see this player, coming over onto the LPGA, only player for donkey's years on her own, winning that US Open. And then everything became possible for them. And to say they've taken it by storm would be a slight understatement. An incredible record for the Korean players in general. But, you've got Japanese players as well, Chinese players. Shan Fang, she's not playing anymore, she's retired, but an incredible 10-time winner on the PGA. So it's an extraordinary stat for the Asian players, but my God, they are good. And like I say, their calmness, their work ethic is absolutely second to none.
I mean, with that in mind, I guess from when you started your career on tour to where the ladies' game is now, and the coverage, the global nature of it, what would you say has been the biggest change from a player's point of view, but then from a structural point of view over the years?
I think the global nature of it, really. I mean, if you look at the LPGA now, when I played on the LPGA, they literally went. There was no Evian, obviously. I'm trying to think. Nichire, which was a team event, was in Japan yearly, but in general, Hawaii was the furthest they travelled. And now, I mean, the Asian tournaments are. I think they have 4 at the end of the year, 2 at the beginning. So there's 6 of those tournaments. They've got Evian, they've got Scotland. It's almost like a worldwide tour to a certain extent. So I think that's the biggest change, is the amount of travelling. American players weren't used to travelling. It used to be just, if I think back to the sort of early days, Jane Geddes was one of the few players. Maybe Amy Alcott came over and played, in Germany and places like that, just for the experience, really, of travelling as much as anything else, new cultures. Not a lot of the American players back then were that keen on doing that. But now it's just like it's second nature to them. So I think that's very different. I'm not sure. I think you got to remember these guys nowadays have so much technical help, whether it be with clubs, with balls, with TrackMan. I mean, it's almost like playing golf by numbers. So I'm never going. In my opinion, I don't think the game is that there are better players. I just think there are more of them. That's the key. Yeah. There are so many good players from all over the world. But certainly back in the day when I played, if you've got Nancy Lopez and, those Betsy King and Pat Bradley, those sort of players, Beth Daniel, you're never going to convince me that the players today are better than that. The mentality, in all honesty, I think was probably stronger years ago because the players were hard as nails, but incredible golfers. But this modern sort of generation, there's just so many good players that hit the ball so far, and that's another thing that's changed. Just how far the players hit it. But obviously, with modern technology, with all the benefits that they have, and the fitness of the players is beyond anything that we would have dreamed of back in the sort of 80s, 90s, and that's another reason why the players hit it so far. And it's a joy to watch. I mean, it really is. You go into a major and you think, well, I've really no idea who is going to win this, because there are so many players capable of playing incredible golf, and that can only be good for the sport.
I mean, one of the things that we're noticing, I've certainly noticed a lot the last couple of years, is how many clients of ours coming in, male, female, old, young, who say, I'm really enjoying watching the ladies golf because I can relate to it. The men's game is where it is, and it's out beyond what any of us can do physically. But actually, the interest levels have increased a huge amount, because it's something that actually your average male amateur player can watch the ladies go, that's something that actually looks relevant to me, and learn probably a little bit more.
I always have a little chuckle at that, because when you say the average male player, that's probably a 9-10 handicap. Well, I have to say, I don't think they're even in the same hemisphere as the women pros, in my opinion.
No, from a kind of relevance of yardage to what they might see day in, day out.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, size. These girls are hitting it 270, 280. The average male amateur does not hit it 270, 280. They might hit one in a blue moon. So I kind of, I hear that a lot. I just think... put it this way, the men's game is beyond. You can't even begin to, no one can, because it's ridiculous the distances they're hitting it. So I kind of understand. But I happen to think that the women's game is, you know what, I think it was it Chevron or was it Pebble Beach? And the girls, they'll have 180 odd yards and they'll have a hybrid in their hand and they'll hit it inside 10 feet so often. I think, in all honesty, it's totally underrated. I don't think people understand how incredibly talented the girls are. If you put 180 yards for the guys, they've probably got 7-iron in their hand. I doubt if they'll hit it inside 10 feet as often as the girls hit a hybrid inside 10 feet. So it's a pretty extraordinary game out there. And that's why I think the guys watch it, because it's just so good. At the end of the day, no one's going to watch it just because they feel it can relate to them. They're going to watch it because the standard is so incredibly high, and that's what it is.
And yeah, I agree on both counts, but it's saying I think it's something that it feels like the audience is growing massively for the ladies' game in terms of from where it's been in the past. And I think an appreciation on both counts. I think people aren't watching it just because it's a distance thing, but I think the coverage has improved for sure. Being able to sit and watch, the Evian Championships being shown and then the Senior Open following on in the coverage rather than the other way around, which it would have been in years past. I
Absolutely.
think is a great move forward. And I think I'm certainly noticing it at my club, how much more integrated things have got. Far less of a men's section, ladies section. Guys at one end of the terrace and the ladies at the other. It's so much more connected than it's ever been. And I think that's a great platform to move forward on that front from.
Yeah, very much so. But I think that's clubs in general. I mean, until I moved back to Porthcawl, as you know, I was a member at Fox Hills, and they don't have a ladies and a men's section as such. They just have, like Saturday is a golf day. You just put down whoever. It could be two men and a woman, two women and a man, whatever. And I think that is actually probably what's more usual these days. And obviously that's fantastic. I mean, if I was a kid growing up now, I'd just be loving life. Obviously, there are still challenges, no two ways about it. There's still more that probably needs to be done. And actually, the more I watch the golf at the moment, I mean, I'm trying to figure out whether I'm a real old fuddy-duddy or not, or I try not to be. But that, when you're looking at clothing and things like that, and you see players wearing hoodies and almost like tracky bottoms and I'm thinking, okay, is that? And then you think to yourself, do you know what? That's the modern generation. That's what you need to do if you want to entice people to play golf. And I think there's a balance. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a line that, I still think you need to have rules and regulations, but I think you also you've got to move with the times without a shadow of a doubt. And I think that's what a lot of clubs have done. And it's definitely for the better for golf in general.
Moving on to something, as you touched on it a moment ago when talking about the likes of Pat Bradley and Dottie. Well, you meant to mention Dottie Pepper, but she was one of the names on my list. Obviously, Solheim Cup's coming up later this year, and you've got a massive history with Solheim Cup. And one of the notes that I made about your career is you seem to come up against some of the toughest players in your singles matches of anyone I could find.
I'm glad you said that, Si, because my record is appalling, as most people will know if they follow Solheim Cup. But yeah, I think I can name them.
You did quite a rum draw from the singles.
Yeah, it didn't seem to matter where I played. For one stretch, I just got Dottie every match. Yeah. It was I could play first, I could play last, I could play middle. It's almost like on a Saturday evening you'd sit there and your captain would read out so and so. When the draw was made, and in the end it became a bit of a running joke. It's like, well, TJ's got Dottie Pepper, so it doesn't really matter where she played. And I'm like, got her again. Yeah, brilliant. But I think if there's one thing that's disappointed me in my career, that's my singles record was awful. Okay, I lost to Dottie 3 times. I think I had Beth Daniel. The only one I actually beat was Paddy Sheehan, which was remarkable because it was the year she was British and US Open champion. So, figure that one out. But Pat Bradley. I played. I think I played Pat Bradley in the very first one. She absolutely annihilated me. So, it's. I've had some tough opponents, but at the end of the day, you have to force your golf on those opponents, and I never did that. And that's probably one of the most disappointing things. I had quite a good record, actually, overall, in foursomes and four balls, and I played with a lot of different players, but my singles was appalling. So disappointed in that, but I think, in all honesty, I loved the team aspect of it so much, and I really, played half decent, played pretty decently, and I got to the singles and I almost felt like I'd lost a limb. And that's not ideal, don't get me wrong. That's not the sort of player you want to be playing singles, but you got to remember a lot of this was all very new. Obviously, I played in the very first one and played pretty much the first 8, I think, or 8 of the first 9. I think I missed one.
Yeah.
And it was so exciting for those first sort of, and we were all mates together. I think there were sort of 6 of us that were probably British and Helen Alfredson and Lotta, who were our mates. So it was like it was a really great bunch of people, and you just really got on. And I loved playing the foursomes and the four balls, and almost like I became a bit lost playing the singles, which it was very disappointing in all.
I mean, with regard to this year and how some teams are shaping up, it looks like on both sides there's going to be a real mix of some real experience and some rookies, as always. But I mean, team-wise, looking at where the lists are at the moment, it looks like yet again it's going to be a great contest. And Finca Courtesans had the match play previously. Seems quite a big course. Is that one? Do you see that being? I don't think courses now really suit one team or the other than course setup. But I think there'll be some European support there this time, which would be great.
Yeah, well, there's two things to this. I think our team is spectacular. I think it's the best team we've ever going to have had. You're literally leaving people out thinking, well, there's probably 6 people that could play that aren't going to play. The team is going to be that good. Admittedly, whether they're all in form at the time might be a different thing. But if you look at the names, it's going to be an incredible team. What I do think is a little bit frustrating for the team, or if I was on the team, would be the fact that it's the first Solheim Cup that I can remember in our history over here that's going to be played in warm weather. You know, we've had 3 in Scotland, 1 in Ireland, 1 in Wales, and 2 in Sweden, I think. And it's the first one that will be guaranteed cracking weather, so it should be loads of noise. And it's on a golf course that is almost unwalkable for most people. And there's going to be like a fan zone, which means the noise on the course for the players, not going to have thousands of people clapping them on every hole, because I think it's just going to be too difficult for people to, it's quite dangerous to do that. So, yeah, it's a little frustrating in that, you finally get to the where you really should have the crowd making a 12th man, and I'm not sure they will. I've got to be honest, I haven't been there. That's only what I've heard. And I think it's pretty spectacular to look at, but whether or not that will play into, Americans' hands, because there won't be quite as much noise actually physically round each green, it could be a little bit disappointing. I'm yet to be, I'm not certain, but that's what I've heard.
And I mean, the atmosphere at a Solheim Cup, and I mean, it always amazes me at a Solheim Cup or a Ryder Cup or a Walker Cup or a Curtis Cup, the quality of golf that's played, the amount of shots to the hole from off the green. I mean, you've been in the cauldron yourself. What is it about those arenas that elevates the players so much?
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It really is. Over the years, things that have happened, you'd almost like, that really? You're going to write that, are you? And that did happen. I guess it's just, it's like because golf is so individual and you so rarely get to play in a team environment, it's the inspiration that you take from your teammates and your crowd, and you're playing for your tour, you're playing for your country, and mostly you're playing for your 11 teammates, really and truly. And it's just that it's je ne sais quoi almost. What is it that spurs you on so much more than if you're just playing for yourself? I mean, women's examples, difficult to say, but certainly in the men's game, Montgomery, players like that, Westwood, the amount of putts that they've holed in Solheim Cups, in Ryder Cups, extraordinary. And yet on their own, amazing. Don't get me wrong, I know they've won bundles of tournaments, but not majors when it really sort of mattered. And yet when it came to the crunch in a Ryder Cup, no problem. It's something it's hard to explain unless you've suddenly been in a team environment when you're not used to that, how incredible it is. And yeah, I've seen so many shots hold that, I played in a couple of times. I've obviously played quite a bit with Laura Davies, and I'll never forget the main one. She hold this chip shot on 17 at Halmstad, and it's a par 3, and it was a 4-ball better ball, and all of us, it was a howling left to right wind, and all of us had gone in the water, apart from Laura, who was up a tree. It was a par 3 over water, and she'd hacked it out to about, 50 feet beyond the flag, and everybody else had chipped up, and you just knew she was going to make it. It was the weirdest feeling. You knew this chip was going to go in, and sure enough, it goes in, and I've never heard a sound like it. It was as though the ground underneath me literally just wiped me off my feet because the noise was so ridiculous. And those things happen, and I don't know why. It's just the moment, just the magic of that moment. But it happens time and time again. Shots that you'd never see hold in regular tournaments, and sure enough, it happens in Solheim Cups and it happens in Ryder Cups, and that's why it's become so incredibly popular, because it's just an atmosphere that you just never get in general at a regular tournament.
And that's you take that and the atmosphere, you get that match play element, and then we've got next week we've got the AIG, the Women's Open at Walton Heath, which Andy Corso's commented said it's looking great for the AIG. That's it's going from Evian, which is one type of course, this last week to then next week to the Heathland. Anyone in particular that you fancy for the AIG?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's a sneaky one to get inside. No pre-warning.
Not letting you off lightly, no.
Well, in all honesty, it's very hard to look past right at this moment in time Celine Boutier, because it's the sort of course that, again, you're not really going to need to overpower, I wouldn't say. It's going to be hard and fast. I can't imagine. I mean, I know it's been raining a bit, well, quite a lot in the last few weeks, but before that, we'd had a lot of dry weather. So, and I'm a huge believer. I know a lot of people aren't. They say it's really difficult to win back to back, and yeah, it probably is. But sometimes you can get in that position where the atmosphere is so amazing. You're so confident. The first few days can just whip by you, and you're in the lead again. And suddenly you just, you go out there, and your confidence is at a level that you just think, do you know what? I'm going to win this again. But I couldn't actually pick one because it doesn't suit anybody in particular. There are so many great players in the game at the moment. None of what you would call the top players are in massive great form. Nelly Korda, Jin Yoon Ko, Nasa Hatioko, the last two majors, has had a great chance. So, you could name absolutely loads. But right now, with it being, in a couple of weeks' time, if she has a half decent week this week in Scotland, although I would say, by the look of the forecast for Scotland, it might be somebody that misses the cut and doesn't have to play all 4 days.
Royal Porthcawl Mark II, is it?
Well, honestly, yeah. I mean, you saw that. I'm assuming you saw that weather yesterday at Porthcawl.
Oh, utterly vile.
Extraordinary. I mean, I literally was driving back. Yeah, I've never seen a prize giving in weather like that. It was just beyond foul. And for those guys to do that, Saturday wasn't a lot better, apart from not rain, I don't think, but the wind was pretty similar. So yeah, the women are at Dundonald this week. The weather forecast does not look great. So I think if you only play a couple of days, but you've played half decent and you kept your swing intact, then that might be someone that has a good chance the following week.
That's actually a really fair comment. You say if we're going to get the bad weather, do players almost sort of want to play that way? If you want to play well week in, week out, but you could seriously risk knocking a swing off if it's heavy wind.
Yeah, very much so. That's the trouble. You have Evian, then Scotland, and then the Open. So you've got those 3 weeks, and everybody knows they're back to back to back. 2 majors in 3 weeks with Scotland lobbed in between. Normally, I would say it wouldn't matter because obviously the AIG is normally on a links golf course, but it isn't this year. I think it's every 5 years, basically. It's in London at one course or another. So it's not the same. Normally you play the week before on a links course, which is great. It gets you kind of in the groove, if you like, for wherever you're normally playing the links course. And actually, the Women's Open is at Royal Porthcawl in 2025, which is going to be very entertaining. So we're looking forward to that. But yeah, it's a tricky one. It's 3 huge weeks, obviously not just for money list golf, but for Solheim Cup as well. It's if you look at last week, Gemma Dryburgh had a really top week, top 10 in a major. She's obviously going back to Scotland, homeland, this week, and then the IRG. She's a name that really has come out of nowhere, if you like. If you go back 2 years, who is playing great golf on the LPGA every week. So, yeah, big week for a lot of players, for a lot of different reasons.
As you say, Walton Heath actually, I guess, similar to Evian, I respect you in that you you've got to drive it straight. You know, the heather's massively punishing, and having had a bit of rain, I play the Heatham course myself, and the heather's as thick as I can remember it for a while. So with that bit of rain, it's just it's flowering, it looks great, looks beautiful, but absolute horror show if you go in it. And around the greens at Walden Heath, they're generally fairly big with lots of little undulations on. So actually, yeah, I guess straight driving and a good short game. As you said,
yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, if it was a links golf course and it was likely to be really tough weather, I think I'd probably go, you know, look at a bigger, stronger player, if you like, somebody that hits it a long way, you know, when the wind's blowing, can maneuver the ball, keep it down, hit it far enough. That'd be interesting. But I don't think it's going to be those sort of conditions. It might be a little ugly, rain-wise, but it's not going to be, nothing like Porthcawl, obviously. So yeah, I see no reason why Solheim Boutier. I mean, hopefully there'll be, you know, a British player, British or Irish player. Leona Maguire obviously has been there or thereabouts. Always sort of in contention in the couple of majors, just not quite got it finished. So there's another player that could be very much, as far as, you know, she's Irish obviously, but for me, she's a home player. She's a Solheim Cup, you know, a player that I look to see play well every week. And then you've obviously got Charlie, Georgia, and a lot of other players, a lot of LET players. Alice Houston's been playing well this year.
Yeah. Olivia Cowan's had a good year.
Sorry?
I think Olivia Cowan's had a good year. Another
Lily May Humphreys. Lily May Humphreys, she's been playing great, you know, so you'd like to see a big week from some of those players. And yeah, I mean, I would like to see an LET, you know, predominantly LET player really have a big week, you know, a bit like we saw at Troon a few years back when Sofia Popov came out of nowhere to win, which was probably one of the most entertaining and emotional sort of, you know, women's opens we've had for a long time. And obviously you've got the defending champion, Ash Buhai, who again has been playing great this year, won her second tournament on the LPGA. So I certainly wouldn't rule anybody out, but I don't think there is a firm favourite, put it that way, because as I say, if you've got 20, so it's now 21 out of 22 of the last majors has been won by different players. How can you say there's a favourite for a major? It's impossible, isn't it?
It's a good time to be a bookie.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Maybe the group betting might be a better idea.
So Trish, thank you so much for your time. It's been so kind of you to hop on the Zoom, give us your insights. You've got such great experience and great memories to draw on, and we're so grateful to have you on. So thank you so much for joining us.
So it's an absolute pleasure. You've done so much for me over the years, as you well know, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So anytime. Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll get that game sometime as well, whether here or I'll have to pop up to Wales when summer.
Definitely.
Summer.
Might be better up in London, I think, otherwise.
Trish, thanks a lot. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye. Bye.
So thank you for Trish for all those insights. I mean, so many years of experience on tour, and so many, the depth of view, the depth of understanding of what's going on, and still commentating. She's still so in touch with everything. So great to have her on. And thanks for the comments that she's going to come on to a couple. I think there were a couple of the stats. I think Peter Cantor, let me scroll through, said that one of the players. JY Co hit 60 plus greens in regulation in a row, which is unbelievable. I think that's the thing. I think, as Trish so rightly said, the ladies' game has been so underrated. I mean, we've worked with a few of the tour players. Manuel Droy, a Belgian player who's high up in the rankings for the last sort of 5 or 6 years. Young German girl Chiara Neuer, since she was 10, who's really up and coming. And the quality of these players is second to none. The consistency. Manuel is one of the most. I don't think I've ever seen someone so repetitive in the hitting rail than maybe Roger Chapman would rival her, but so impressive from a ball strike and a consistency point of view. And I think really with the AIG being at Walden Heath, which is a course that those who are local to this area know well, fascinating watching them play a course well, because I think it gives a bit of a greater depth of understanding of the shots they're hitting and the quality of the shots they're hitting as well, where they're playing from and to. So it's a slight composite course. I think they are doing, obviously I think it's starting on the second on the old, and they cut out the 30 short 4, and then they add in 12 and 13 on the new. So the same one that the guys, when they play there, do as well. So if you get a chance to go along, hopefully the weather holds, I think it'd be great experience to go and see they're putting quite a festival on there with music and things as well, so should be a great time. Dave Hurley, what would you say the average swing speed for the ladies on tour for driver and irons is? Their tempo's fantastic. Totally agree on that. Their rhythm and the timing and balance of the swings is great. I think on driver swing speed, I've seen anything from 90, 92 miles an hour through to, Chiara's probably the longest I've seen. She's at 103, 104 as a sort of stock swing, can get it up a little bit more than that. And iron-wise, kind of low mid 80s in terms of club speed. So still looking at 6-iron distances of so around the 170 mark, and driver at sort of 250 plus, 240, 250 plus. But carrying to 230 to 250, 260, we've seen Chiara up pushing 300 yards. So the strength and the technique that they employ is so good. So really impressive. So thanks to Niels, great to see you on as well. I'm glad you've enjoyed that. I think without my Morecambe to my wise on this week, I'm going to have to try and sort of find some interesting things to talk about. But we obviously got the Titleist heads we're going to start to do a little bit of fitting with this week. That's going to be good to get in. I've got we've just got a kind of a shot actually of the 18th at the Evian in the background. We thought I'd have some kind of relevance. But if there's anything that anyone wants me to look at or talk about, or any questions on anything, just please fire them in. Happy to get a product, hit it, test it. Talk about it if there's anything you want me to look at as well. I think from we're about to get some products coming through. So obviously Titleist this week, TaylorMade, Mizuno, Callaway have products coming up. So we're in a period where we're just sort of waiting for these products to come through. So within these sort of lives moving forward, we're going to be able to talk about what we're finding about some of the products in the fitting bays and what's coming out, and maybe doing some live testing as well. So hope we're getting embargo dates coming through. I think TaylorMade, it's going to be mid to late mid-August, I think, for some of theirs as well. So you'll start to see some of those products seeding on tour. So some of the milled grind TaylorMade wedges, you've seen pictures of those coming out. Updates on the P790. That's been coming for a couple of years. They've actually extended the life cycle of the 790 about 6 months to cater for that. So we look forward to getting those in and showing some data on those too. So I think, let me see if there's, what should we look at from a club point of view? Let me just I'll hit something and talk about it and get a new product, unless there's anything specific that anyone wants me to do. So I'll get one of the latest heads. We'll give that a hit. So, actually, let me get, I'm going to get one of the Titleist heads from the workshop, because we can talk about performance. So like the T350, I'll get that head. Excuse the squeak of my shoes on the concrete. So one of the products that's launching this week, so I can talk about it and the performance, but not necessarily the tech in it until Thursday. So the T350. So this is a head which is sort of taking over from T300. It's got a little bit more of an evolvement off the T300 than some of the others. They've definitely changed this one up a little bit more. Definitely looking at gaining rid of ball speed. Definitely looking at getting a bit more yardage out of it. But generally speaking, one, just a little bit of a neater profile. They've made the look a little more consistent through all of their lines this year. But one of the aspects that they're looking to improve on, one, the acoustics, but also some of the spin retention. So let's get my glove. So Neil's extending on wedges. Are more players choosing cavity back like the S23 or the Cleveland CBX, and who is it for? I think there are. I mean, that's actually one aspect club head-wise where there hasn't really been a lot of progression over the years. I think it's fair to say that Cleveland with their CBX, Ping the Glides have always had a little bit of perimeter weighting, so a small amount of help. But still, broadly speaking, are pretty blade-like. So that the CBXs have a little bit more of a cavity. I think some of that's to do with the width of sole, giving a little more sole width for bunkers in particular, making them giving a little bit more to kind of thump into the sandwich and stop them digging. And so Cleveland have got the graduated sole that they employ through their Dunlop own Strixon and Cleveland, but that kind of graduated angled sole shape from the Strixon irons through to the Cleveland wedges, and that's been in evidence for a number of years. Callaway have got a cavity back wedge, but the honest answer is there aren't many, and actually it's surprising how few there have been, because for a player that plays something like the T350 iron, you've got quite a substantial sole width and perimeter weighting, and then you're asking players to basically play a blade once they go beyond pitch wedge or gap wedge. So it's something that I would expect more companies to go down than have already, but I'd expect that would be something. It wouldn't surprise me if more and more companies did it. Mizuno, the S23 aren't particularly cavity back. They've just moved some weight more out to the toe. So rather than the sweet spot being slightly inside, they've moved some mass out to the toe side to get the centre of gravity in the centre of the face. But it's not really a forgiving head. So I think that's something that the industry could do better at, quite frankly, from a head manufacturer point of view, because say you're asking most players to play a blade once they go beyond pitch wedge. Peter Cantor, what does 1 inch tip mean when you see there's a sort of mark just in the way of one of your words on that? Let's see if I can. And you see pros driver or fairway spec on their website. So 1 inch, so tipped is what they do with the shaft. So with every shaft, there's some of the steel shafts there isn't, but every graphite wood shaft, there's a certain amount of parallel section at the bottom end, at the tip end of the shaft. So tipping it is effectively shortening it. It's cutting, when you say 1 inch tipped, 1 inch of tipping is trimming 1 inch off the bottom end of the shaft. So functionally what it does is you're shortening the parallel section. So there's a 3 or 4 inch parallel section at the bottom, pretty much every graphite wood shaft. So by shortening it, you're reducing the length of the weakest bit of the shaft, so it's firming it up. So it reduces a little bit of deviation, it tightens it up a little bit. It doesn't change the flex very much, but you're firming with the bottom section. Because you're firming that up slightly, you will drop spin very slightly, but it also firms up the feel. So it's a way of just very slightly altering the bend dynamics of the shaft, but also just firming that feel up a little bit. So that's what they refer to on their website. George Smith, I'm looking at coming for a fitting in the next few weeks. Is it worth waiting for the new releases coming out soon? I mean, there's an argument to say yes, but equally, so we've got and we'll be able to start fitting with the Titleist heads in the next couple of days. There are always going to be, every 6 months, there are always going to be product launches. And just because, I mean, if you want to have the latest clubs in your bag, then yes, we'll have a few more of those in the coming weeks. Exact dates I'm yet to have from Callaway. TaylorMade, I've got some of those, I'm just not necessarily allowed to take them yet. But performance-wise, there aren't big differences coming, and they're all, I guess everything's a progression. But I guess, yeah, if you want to have the latest clubs in your bag, then yes, just hold out through sort of second half of August, and we should have a couple of extra products coming in. If you want to have the biggest variety of products to test that's the newest, then probably early September, and then come January time there'll be a host of other product launches as well. So what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to hit a couple of shots. I'm going to put this to a relevant distance where it might catch the green. Now this is based on a course that's at altitude, so I'm going to guess at how far it's going to go. So it's going to go further than it would do at ground level. So, but we're going to hit a couple have a look at a little bit of the data, but just to explain what the feedback is like to hit with it, what you can expect out of these clubs, and then when the time comes in the next week or so, we'll be able to put out the technical details on them. So, one of the aspects with these, all the new Titleist heads, is they're a very clean shape. The heads blend really well model to model, so the progression's a really natural one. From a lot of the time, the head shapes they change. They sometimes don't really match in what we call the crutch area, which is this bit right in the base of the neck. But actually the lines through the different models, the 100, 150, 200, 350, progress really nicely. So now I've obviously been stood not doing much for about 45 minutes, so that's my excuse for hitting a bad shot. So that's pretty much it's a good hit, just gone a bit right. So one of the things with the previous models was one of the big criticisms was the sound off the heads. Now this is still a hollow head, it's still got a very light backing like the T200 did, whereas the 300 was open backed. But one of the things that I think is noticeable with this head is it's less of a harsh click. So still a very powerful head. I've got underneath that and spooned it right, but it's not as hollow a feel as the previous models have been. So, almost taken out someone on the deck there. So if I can get one to go straight, I can give you a judge on where the spin is. So certainly to hit with, it's a much nicer club to hit with. Yeah, so that's hit really well. It might drift right a little bit, but hit really nicely. So it's a very stable feel through the ball. I think one of the things across the few models, particularly 150, 200, 350, it's not just saying, yes, it's definitely, you can tell there's some explosiveness, you can tell there's some speed off the face, or it has that feel, but the head feels really stable at impact. The way I would describe it is it feels like it stays with the shot. You don't really get a sensation of twisting. So, for that one, for a head that's down at sort of 27 degrees loft, for that shot for me, efficiency 1.46. So for a 6-iron, that's pretty strong. I'm looking for something 1.4 or more. But normally out of these heads, you lose all spin. That's still got 4.5, 4.6, 4,500, 4,600 revs of spin, which is about where my 5-iron would be, which actually, considering the tech in the head and what they're trying to do with it, that's not that low. I've often seen 3,900, 3,800 revs of spin on a similar kind of design of head to this. So I'm trying to do the one more there. So yeah, the balance of the head through the ball and how stable it feels at contact. Actually considering, yes, they're all a little bit right of target, but depending on I don't know how visible it is on your screen, but in the bottom right, there's a little small map of the hole. And actually grouping wise, distance consistency, very, very high. So actually that's one of the aspects of this club, consistency across the face. If I try I'm just going to see if I can catch one a little bit out the toe and just see what that does to ball speed. Yeah, so that was quite a bit out the toe. Can't quite see the, yeah, and that's gone the same yardage, give or take. It's maybe dropped a few. I would say, I don't think it'll be visible from on camera here, but what I can see is I can see some dimple marks just out on that toe side. So if you centre strike here, and there's some dimple marks out there, so I've moved pretty much half a golf ball across the face there. So probably not visible on the camera, but that's still a 142 efficiency and actually retained 4.9 on spin. So actually ball flight retention, performance retention, really very strong. So that's something that we're seeing, certainly from our testing across from the 150s, 200s and the 350s in particular. So going to be some good performance off of those. And then MacV 2.1, roll of the golf ball has a huge impact on fitting numbers. Would you recommend a ball fitting before someone comes in for a club fitting? Brackets high handicap player. No, I wouldn't. The golf ball does have a pretty decent impact on fitting numbers, but what's only going to be relevant as a start point is what ball you're currently using. We can then start testing with that or with a very, very similar construction of ball. And then if we can see that a noticeable difference in performance could be had, or an improvement in performance could be had by changing, whether it's from a Pro V1 style ball to something like a let's say a tricks on an AG333 or a soft field, going to a softer core, or vice versa, or going the other way. Actually, even if you're a higher handicap player with high club speed, actually the construction of a premium ball will give you better efficiency and better consistency. That's something that can be incorporated into a club fitting, because if you come for a ball fitting, if you were to look at the ball first, you might be fitting for a ball based on the performance of some ill-fitting clubs. So actually it's always better to use the ball to fine-tune the numbers rather than use it to overly influence them. So that would be something we'd use once we get the clubs as efficient as possible. If we need a bit more spin or a bit less spin, or if you're wanting to optimize performance around the greens, that's when you use the premium style ball for spin control. Or if you're trying to optimize directional consistency for someone who's got a little bit of a spray off the tee, then you'd go to a ball with a firmer cover so it doesn't grip the face as much. So something like I say, more of a kind of inverted commas distance ball. You can utilize a ball's type and style and construction to optimize and fine tune that performance and to get the kind of last bits out of it. But I would do it that way around rather than ball first. So going on to those and see if there is anything else coming through. Not yet, but thank you for the questions so far. So what we'll be looking at, I think what we'll be looking at into the coming weeks as we get into the latter part of the season. Obviously, we've got the final ladies majors coming up. We've got the back end of the PGA Tour season coming up. Obviously, FedEx Cup playoffs are going to come up, and then Solheim Cup, Ryder Cup. Going to be interesting to see who makes those teams and how those two teams form up. Lots of chat about the 6 picks that are going to be coming up. I'm sure that's going to produce a whole load of conversation and debate. But I think some really interesting selections to be made based on, certainly for take Ryder Cup European teams where certain players have performed well on that course. I think that can take a major impact into it. I think from of course, we've got the Marcus Simone on the sim, so we'll be able to do some hitting on the course there. But I think as a course setup, looking at it as we would do from the equipment standpoint, I think it could be a fascinating course. I think there's some really different setups there. Some players are probably going to go more the driving iron route just for getting into play. But there are going to be some really big shots they're going to have to play. And I think at that time of year, weather could play a part. Not quite as far south as the Solheim Cup. But I think weather-wise, we've seen some wind whipping across that course. And I think it'd be fascinating to see what players play what clubs there, because I think it's a course that's, I wouldn't say unique. It's quite an interesting course from a shot type point of view. Some players are going to look for higher shots coming in, so might go for lofted fairway woods, hybrids. And I think other players are going to really value being in play. I think the rough's going to be pretty punishing. So could be a fascinating course from a club setup point of view. So really looking forward to that coming up. We're getting to crescendo of the season now. All the men's majors are done. So looking forward to that coming up. But unless anyone's got any other particular questions, I think what we'll probably do is wrap up relatively soon. If there is anything that you want me to look at or answer, then please fire them in. But we'll probably tie up fairly shortly, seeing as we so having got Trish on, we've covered that part of the game, the ladies pro game, and what's going on there. I thought that was a relevant one to have this week. Thanks to those who've tuned in and asked the questions, as ever. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and like and all the usual. Enjoy the content on the channel. We'll hopefully have Mr. Cartwright back next time round, which will make it a little bit easier for me rather than having to do it on my own. It's useful having a partner in crime, especially when you're in this bit where you're trying to cover as many items. He's always got some strong opinions on things. But unless any other questions come in, thank you again for tuning in. Thanks for watching. We'll try and advertise a bit of what's going on next week on next Monday's show. Thursday, Friday, Saturdays to get a bit of insight. Another question from MacV 2.1. For your casual player, does everyone need to be fit for a full 14 club setup? Answer is no. Actually, quite a lot of the time we fit people for less than 14 clubs. 14 is a maximum rather than a necessity. So I would always say play the clubs that that you need. There are times where it's a bit of variety, some options, particularly down maybe in the wedge end of the bag, that some, a couple of different options, a couple of different lofts, that can give some versatility and variety to the shots you can play. But actually for a lot of players, where we're now needing to go more loft to get ball flight and gap correctly, you don't want to try and force too many clubs into someone's bag and then end up with one club that you don't really use. So I think the key thing is make sure you've got a shot, a club that does a particular job for you, particularly from between driver and your longest iron. You've got to make sure that they differentiate on carry distance, and then they can give you clear job roles. Or if you've got a course that requires a specific shot, then make sure you've got a club, whether it's it could be a lofted wood, or if you're playing on a links, it could be a driving iron, that do a particular job for you. But no, 14 is the maximum, so certainly don't always fit for 14. And then radon, so-called low handicap, higher than average speed, and I've been fitted into TSR2 driver rather than TSR3. TSR3 is considered as the driver for my category. Any concerns? They're both very good heads. So we fit a lot of very good high-speed players into mid-spin drivers. The TSR2 is actually going to be across the face a bit more consistent for you. Well, not for you, but for anyone. So the TSR2 is not necessarily particularly different on spin to TSR3. They're actually quite similar on that respect. The smaller head style will suit certain players of the TSR3, certain players, and then the slightly bigger, deeper weighting of the TSR2. If you do tend to have a bit of a toe miss, TSR2 is a really good head for that. So it's not necessarily in the past. The 2 series head has always been higher spin. So there might have been concerns, potential concerns on spin rate in that respect. However, between the 2 and the 3, they're pretty consistent. So it's certainly not something that flags up. Ultimately, it depends on how your swing and that head perform in particular. If you have a bit of a toe miss, TSR2 tends to be a little bit better. TSR3, slightly more solid feel, maybe a little bit lower launching, a little bit, but not massively. So both very good heads. So I think we're probably about wrapped up. I think we're hitting time for the evening. So thanks again for all the questions. So anything else you want us to look at in future shows, future videos and reviews, please just let us know. We're happy to look into anything that within reason, anything that people want us to. And thanks for tuning in. As said, subscribe, like, hit the bell button. We'll trying to get as much content out there as possible. And it's been so grateful to you guys for watching and tuning in, and we'll get as much out as we can in the future. So look forward to next Monday, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.